Hello, Dr. Edna. Thank you so much for joining the Introscope internal communication series that I run on my blog. This is a long-standing series with thought leaders from around the world, and I'm so delighted to have you on my show. So before we get started, if you could quickly introduce yourself for our viewers.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, let me thank you. It's just an honor and a pleasure to be here. My name is Edna Ayme-Yahil. I am the head of communications, brand, and sustainability at SITA, which provides IT and communication services to the airline industry. I live currently in Geneva, Switzerland. I'm originally American, but I've been living in Europe for the past 20 years in various communication roles. And I'm very passionate about internal communications, and I'm really thrilled to be talking to you about this topic today.
Fantastic. So let's get started. So what's your understanding? How do you define internal comms, and what does it mean to you?
So that's a very complicated question, even though it seems simple at first sight. I think, if you really want to take it to the top level, internal comms is about the flow of information that you have, information and engagement around an organization, right? And so sometimes people will focus on its people, its processes, its tools, but for me, it's much more than that. It's how it works together, right? In addition to that, I think with in the past few years, the field has become much more developed, and there's been a lot more thinking, both academic and by practitioners. And we see that they're both the formal and the informal channels. So it's no longer about the intranet, the town hall, etc. It's just much more than that. And it's also just about flow. So how is corporate information passed to employees, and how is their feedback going back up to management, to the CEO, even to the board? So all of that is in a nutshell what internal communication is.
Fantastic. And how does it get practiced in your organization? Some of the nuances of it.
So SITA is a very special organization. Let me just give a little background before I go into the details. We're present in almost 160 countries. We have employees who are in certain major sites, but also ones who are servicing airports primarily. And so what we do in SITA is we have a framework for internal communications, but we have several different channels that we use. So first and foremost, we have our top leadership. So the top sort of 140, 150 people, mostly reporting into the executive committee. And they're called our Evolve leaders. Evolve is part of our transformation program. And we have a special program, which is sponsored by the CEO, which really works to inform these leaders, to train them. There's a leadership course that they're taking in partnership with IMD, and so we really depend on these leaders to help communicate within the organization. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we do have direct from the CEO communication through regular calls with managers, through all staff calls, which we hold once a quarter, and then we have a really neat program, which I inherited, so I can't say that I'm responsible for it, but we have something called the Location Leaders Program. So again, one of the unique things at SITA is that often employee's manager will be in another country, right? And so the location leader is someone who is usually the most senior person at a major location, so Geneva, Atlanta, Dubai, Singapore, etc. They have a day job, so this is something they do in addition. They work in partnership with the country HR, and they run a program that has a lot of employee engagement for people who are in that particular location. This became extremely useful during COVID and the pandemic, because a lot of the shutdowns, back to work regulations, etc., were changed from country to country. And so we ended up relying much more on this location leader community to do the internal communication. And my team manages also that community. We have a monthly call with them. We prepare material, etc. Then, and I'm continuing with other things that we do. We have obviously we have an intranet, which is quite robust. We have a newsletter that we send every other week from corporate that kind of just collects and curates, key information, internal and external, and sort of pushes that out. And those are sort of the basic channels. We also have a lot of special programs that we've put in place linked to coronavirus. So obviously there's the work from home. When we first went into lockdown, we had to make sure that everyone had a computer, had access to the internet. It was quite tough. I mean, it was quite complicated. And I think we moved from that sort of panic mode, and I would say March 2020, into really starting to realize we're going to be here for a long time. We need to over communicate. We need to also start to offer well-being opportunities for people. And again, often this is done location by location, and it's everything from digital yoga to, in Ireland, they had a very famous cook come and give a cooking class for everyone. My team may have occasionally had cocktails on Friday afternoon in front of the computer, but we really try to put in place some programs, and also even, when we would have our staff calls, spend, more time on wellness, well-being, and how people were responding, rather than only give updates on the business. So it's been interesting, to put it mildly.
Oh, that's quite a lot of stuff which y'all do. I mean, that's impressive. So if you could reflect on a campaign or an example that you're personally, proud of, and what is the kind of impact it had on the organization?
So I'll give two. So I think I've talked a lot about the coronavirus response. I mean, I think the coronavirus response in SITA, for me professionally, as well as for my peers, I'm involved with a lot of groups with other people who are heads of comms, especially in Europe, and it's really been. My remit is much larger than just internal comms, but the amount of time I spent on internal comms this year was greater percentage-wise than it would be, and I don't think that's changing. I think there's a new, kind of appreciation for that. But let me go to the recent past, meaning pre-COVID, and I joined SITA right when lockdown happened in March 2020. Before that, I was at Panalpina, which is in Basel, and was one of the top 5 logistics freight forwarders. Right. They were bought by DSV, which is why I left that job. But while I was at Panalpina, we put together a fantastic campaign called the Panalpina Spirit, and it was really linked to the values, to the vision, the mission, and the campaign was done with employees, by employees, using employee models, and really, we created a joint narrative with the employees of the company, and then enabled employees to sort of tell their story about the long, rich history of the company. And I think those types of really strategic projects that are linked to the company's purpose and vision are the ones that really are long-lasting and really, meaningful in the end.
Great. And switching gears, wanted to ask you, what do you think is the biggest opportunity that you see for internal communicators? And follow-up question to that would be, what's the opportunity that you see?
The biggest, I'm sorry, the opportunity.
Biggest challenge, and what's the biggest opportunity?
Okay. So I think the biggest challenge is that in some organizations, it's considered the ugly stepchild of external comms. And that's a reality. I think it's also a reality on the market. It's wrong because actually, often you can have more measurable impact doing internal comms than you can doing external comms, right? So I think that's sort of the biggest channel. I think the opportunity, especially as a young professional, is that often in internal comms, you have closer access to business strategy and to the senior leadership than you might when you're sort of like, you know, person 10 writing the press release. I'm exaggerating a bit. And so I think that for the individual communicator, it's really having an internal communication role for a few years or longer is a wonderful opportunity to be close to senior leadership, to really truly understand the business, okay, and also to influence stakeholders in a positive manner, and one that is quick to have results, as opposed to when you're doing, you know, a public affairs campaign that can take years to change legislation. So I think there's a lot more personal satisfaction that can come in a role like this.
And you rightly mentioned that, you know, it's always seen as a stepchild of, you know, of broader comms. So how do you think internal communicators can add more value and get a seat at the table? So because this is a question which has always been on people's minds.
Yeah, well, I think the key is to be closely linked to the business and speak the language of the business. And there's several things that need to happen, I think. One is it's really important to put in place, especially if you're dealing corporate-wise or regional-wise, to put in place programs with clear identification of what you're offering. So I'm offering as an internal communication, for example, to help build capacity, communication capacity in your team. I'm not writing your emails for you, but I will train your people how to do that, okay? So that's what I'm offering. To also put in place the right toolkits and processes so that people can help themselves and know what to do, right? And to really focus on adding value. And I think that it's really easy to just be the servant internal communicator. And it takes a lot more to kind of step back and put in place a program where you can see measurable feedback, but also know how to sort of push back to demands that are unreasonable. You know, the days of I have a old presentation here, but the days of sort of just putting posters on the wall is finished. I think the other thing that is happening, which has changed since I started doing internal comms several years ago, is that I think HR is getting more involved really in employee engagement. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to really partner with HR, either on the change management side or on the employee engagement, or even in the talent acquisition side, which is sort of borderline between, it's more employee communications, right? It's a bit external, but I think there's room to partner. But the key for me is be linked to the business, do what the business wants, and use business vocabulary. You know, KPIs, EBITDA, you know, don't use comms jargon, speak the language of your customer.
Great, that's a great point. And if you were to reflect on, you know, your journey, and what are some of the core skills or key skills that communicators, internal communicators need to have or develop?
So this is it's good that you ask. So I just completed a program with my HR business partner at SITA, where what we did was we mapped out the competencies for the whole marketing profession. So we have marketing and communications in there. And, you know, we went around to all of our different geographies. We got input from an external provider, and we really put in place a framework for SITA. But I think it's adaptable for other people. So, you know, it starts off for me with the communication strategy, right? So, and that means you have a structured, planned activity. We have at SITA a editorial calendar for the whole company, and then each of the geographies, each of the business units, corporate, feed into that. We have regular meetings. So we have, you know, with management, we have quarterly meetings where we talk really strategy. With the heads of the regions or the business units, we have monthly meetings. And then with everyone, we have a weekly meeting where we really go through what's being done and we share. So that strategy and then executing off of it is the first thing. Writing and messaging. How do you define, create, and deliver key messages across different channels, right? So it can be orally, it can be written, etc., is key. when I see people who sort of get stuck, hit a glass ceiling, often the skill that's missing is the writing. So that's something you really need to work on early in your career. I think channels and tactics is something people need to understand and manage effectively and in a smart way. And there are constantly new ones, and you really need to continue to learn and see what's available and what you want to do, and also what people are using on the outside. I mean, you know, a lot of companies want to use Yammer, right? And no offense to Microsoft, but it's not the same experience that you have on TikTok, right? So your employees want to have a similar experience communicating internally. I think research, analysis, and measurement is key. But impactful research. Don't have a deck of 50 slides for management, but really show with a few key KPIs how you're making an impact on the business. I think business knowledge, business savvy, really understanding finance, operations, supply chain, sustainability. These are key to making yourself effective. So it's not just, I think I may have lost you. Oh, there you are. Okay, yeah, I think that's really key to moving things forward. And finally, it's the relationship with your customers, with your internal stakeholders, and you need to be able to be effective, but also to say no. And saying no is sometimes harder than saying yes.
And there are a lot of youngsters out there who want to join this profession. So what's your advice? And related to that, there are a lot of women and who want to kind of get into this domain. I'm again talking from a Asia context and that perspective. So what's your advice for them as to what should they be thinking about when they join a profession like this?
Well, I think the biggest thing to think about with for youngsters, and I say this to a lot of people, is what's your end game? Okay, not first you get out of university, you want a job, like yay, I have a job. Okay, but then you need to start to think, where do I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Now you can have a beautiful career your whole life in internal comms, and especially if you're a change management practitioner, etc. You can move into consulting or corporate or whatever, but it should be a choice, right? And if you want to have a job like me, which is head of comms, I mean, I was doing internal comms, I would say from about 2009 to about 2015 exclusively. And then I made a conscious decision that I wanted a broader job, right? And I think it's, where I see people seeing regret is they get to a certain age, and they've been in internal comms their whole life because they never really, it's not because they want to. If you want to, fine, and it's great, but don't be stuck there because, someone else wants press experience or something. So I think it's really being conscious of what's happening in the future, enjoying the present, but constantly, positioning yourself. For women, I think the key for me, and I say this with a bit of regret, is that the career is a marathon, not a sprint. If I could do it again, I probably would have slowed down and had the second child. I have a 14-year-old daughter that I love very much. But by the time we decided we wanted a second one, it was a bit late. And so, if I could do it again, I would say you can have both a career. You definitely can have both a career and be a mom. I am. And sometimes you won't sleep a lot, but you can do it. But also think about, the long term.
Got it. And you briefly mentioned about COVID-19, and so what according to you has changed? What has stayed the same with internal communications?
I think the one thing is, now video, Zoom fatigue, there are all kinds of words that have entered into our vocabulary, right? I think the challenge now, assuming that we're going back in certain markets, and in other markets we hope to go back soon, is that hybrid work is here to stay. And how do you create, there've always been companies that are fully remote, right? And there are companies where people were there full time, but how do you create an environment where you're able to communicate with people who are physically present but also not there? How do you not discriminate against people who may be working remotely because they have older parents or kids or live further away? Will they have the same career opportunities, etc.? So I think that the trick in the coming days, with COVID, everyone was at home, or most people were at home, right? And the trick now is really how do you focus and work around communication so that you really can be inclusive for everyone? I do not have an answer. It's really, really, really complicated. There are also certain markets or certain industries where people are less interested in going back to the office. And then there are other jobs, like nurse, where you have to be physically there. So I think this is a space that's fascinating, and we need to continue to look at for quite some time.
Got it. And what according to you is a trend that you spot with internal communications? So
for sure, do-it-yourself videos. And for a long time, there's become less and less, if you will, formality within corporate communications internally. It's not corporate speaking to the employees, but I think now what we see is with most employees having smartphones, with people knowing how to do different things, I think do-it-yourself video is a very positive trend. It's important. So, for example, our brand team also has worked on helping people who are doing their own videos make them on brand, etc., even on the phone, which I think is useful. And then, if you really want to get into kind of geeky, cool trends, it's using avatar, mixed reality. I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff, very techie stuff that's available now that was just too expensive in the past to do for internal comms, and now it's a lot easier. So I think it's yeah, those would be the two.
And as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you if there's one thing that you'd like to change about how internal comms is done, looking back on your journey, what would that be?
Well, I go back to what I said before. I think what I would like to change is the perception that it's less than the external, because it's not. It's just as important, if not more important.
Great. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much, Dr. Edna, to speak to me about this. And I think these insights are brilliant, and I'm sure our audiences will love that.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, I really appreciate the invitation to come talk today.